Hi, I'd like to talk to you today about crafting your library budget. And as most of you know, library budgets are financial requests for funding that are going to have line items and accounts and forecasts for various sources of revenues and obviously expenditures. But really, a budget request is a statement of values and goals, and achieving your ultimate budget goal involves developing, nurturing, and drawing upon a lot of crucial relationships. With all that in mind, it's critical that first and foremost, you get clear about your library's values and goals before you even get started drafting your annual budget request. And determining these values and goals are really outside the scope of this video, but please reach out to me if you'd like to discuss these topics one-on-one. So, once you're clear about your library's goals and values for the next 1, 2, and 3 years, what are some of the steps you need to take before formally drafting your budget request that will align with these values and help you accomplish your goals? First of all, learn your library's budgetary history and trends, and make note of the reasons for these trends as best you can understand them. Look at what percentage your overall budget has increased or decreased each of the last 5 to 10 years, as well as entirely over those 10 years. What were the underlying reasons for these changes is a question you want to ask, you want to dig into. What relationships might have been factors in impacting these changes? Were there previous directors who took a different approach to budgeting? Were there different governing bodies, city officials, county administrators whose personalities or views on finances impacted the budget of your library historically? These are all really important pieces of information to gather and to put in context as you go forward preparing your budget. Secondly, learn what financial resources and potential sources of revenue you have available to you. This is a no-brainer. Where's the money going to come from? Where can it come from? So, in addition to, let's say, a municipal or a county body that might be providing the majority of your funding or not, if you're a 501c3 that's entirely funded privately, you want to get really clear on where money and funding can come from and broaden your view outside of maybe your inner circle to include state and federal sources of funds, grants, trusts, you name it. Really, any opportunity that might be a source of funding for your library. And do your due diligence and forecast expenditures that you anticipate for the upcoming 1, 2, and 3 years. Again, this might seem like a no-brainer, but some people just take it for granted that they're just going to stick with the existing structure of their budget from the last 5 years and really not dig into the details on how money was spent and why it was spent. So, for example, take a look at your books and materials budget. How has it changed over the past several years, if it's changed? What market forces or inflation, once you factor those in, how does that make sense of your materials budget as it stands right now? And how does that inform your decision about creating a materials budget for this coming year? Things like utilities and facilities maintenance, those can be major expenditures. I'm not referring to capital expenditures, but that's another category of expenditures to look at, especially now where a lot of utility costs are increasing rapidly. And of course, look carefully at your personnel and related expenditures and costs in your budget, both historically and what you forecast for the year ahead and multiple years ahead. Keep in mind how are union contracts going to play a role in your budget and ultimately and in your funding and your expenditures, if that's relevant at your library. Once you've got an idea of funding sources and forecasted expenditures, I want you to also do a lot of research analyzing the metrics of your library, performance metrics. So you're going to be gathering a lot of statistics about the performance of your library. Hopefully that's a practice you already have in place. And if not, this is a great time to start doing that. You want to look at your own institution, whether it's a one-off library, multiple branch system, countywide system. You want to gather different levels of detail based on how broad or extensive the system is you're working in. Gather data from IMLS or from your state or county agencies that are tracking large repositories of data, and use Excel to help you understand that data. If you're not strong with Excel, that's another reason to reach out to me. I might be able to give you some tips and tricks on how to filter, analyze, even use pivot tables to put in context the performance of your library relative to comparable libraries, geographically, population size, you name it. I could teach a whole class on that. So again, make comparisons, understand how your library is performing, especially on a per capita basis. So a lot of library directors will look at total circ, but total circ per capita is a far more informative measure when you're doing comparisons with communities that are much larger or much smaller, or even the same size. Look at your materials expenditure line per capita relative to other libraries. I can think of numerous examples where clients have taken this approach and discovered that a neighboring town had a far higher per capita expenditure on materials, even though they had a lower gross budget for materials. And that became a really good selling point for arguing for increasing their budget. Same thing with visits. How many visits are you getting at your library per capita, downloads, all of it. The more of a data junkie you can be, the more informed you're going to be. And as I said, if that's not your strength, find people who can help you to do that. Don't just settle for generalities. Okay, what's next? I want you to really reflect on the political context in which you are operating and in which your budget exists. Okay, so you want to understand who are the key decision makers, who are primarily your allies, who are potentially your skeptics. What kind of relationships do you as a director have with each of these individuals? How about your board or your friends group? Are they able to advocate appropriately on behalf of the library? Do they have relationships with budgetary decision makers who they can reach out to appropriately to advocate for the library and your budget and your goals and your values and the initiatives that you have forecasted for the next 1, 2, and 3 years? Again, if you're not comfortable developing those relationships yourself, draw upon, again, members of your board, members of your friends groups, you name it. A lot of budget development is about relationship development, and directors don't often realize that. They think it's just about spreadsheets and numbers. Not the case, in my opinion. Okay, after you've gathered and analyzed all of this information, along with your notes about your library's values and goals for the coming 1, 2, and 3 years, you're almost ready to start crafting your budget and plugging in numbers into a spreadsheet. But, and here's a big but, there's one more step I highly recommend that many directors overlook. Here it is. Get clear about your mindset around money and around budgets and around asking and advocating for financial support and funding. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm going to answer that with a few questions. Are you usually apprehensive about advocating around financial issues, both at work and in your personal life? Think about it. Be honest with yourself. Are you anxious about possibly upsetting budgetary decision makers by asking for what you fear might be seen as too much. Also, do you tend to avoid these anticipated uncomfortable feelings, and as a result settle for asking for less, possibly rationalizing it as a way to be a team player? If you answered yes to any of these questions, and most people will answer yes to at least one of them, then I encourage you to do a lot of reflection and to reach out to me, set up a free 30-minute coffee chat, and let's talk about your money mindset. Because the clearer you get and the deeper you examine these fears and these potentially limiting beliefs, the more empowered you will allow yourself to become, and the more impactful an advocate you will be for your library's budget. So, once you've gotten clear about your money mindset and what does it mean to be in a healthy place to ask for funding that is appropriate for your library's growth and expansion and to become a great library, then you're ready to begin drafting your budget requests and strategically making choices about how this year's budget will differ from the current year's budget. So make sure once you're ready to start plugging in numbers that you document all the reasoning that you're about to make or that you're going to use to make changes from the current year's budget into next year's budget, because you'll need that information for your budget narrative and for when you give any presentations on behalf of the library's budget request. So, covered an awful lot of material. I hope this has been informative, gives you a lot to think about. And as always, I'd love to hear from you if you have any questions, if you have any concerns about putting together your budget proposal and developing the reasoning behind it. Reach out to me. Go to my website, uncomfortablefund.com, and book a free call. Let's talk about where has your library budget come from and where would you like it to go? Why? What blocks do you anticipate getting in the way? And how can you overcome those blocks? Hope to hear from you.